Can we confirm it's live?
We're now live and being broadcast. Please welcome the Mayor of Bracknell Forest, Councillor Jenny Penfold.
Just turned it off. So welcome to the meeting. Remember it's being live streamed and recorded and live streamed on YouTube. Only councillors in the room are able to vote. I have waived the requirement to stand when speaking, which is in the council procedure rules. I now declare the meeting open. Right, are there any apologies, Clark?
We have apologies from Councillor Egglestone.
Right, does anyone in the room know of anybody else who sent apologies? No, that's good. Clark, are there any people joining online?
Yes, we have Councillor Welch joining online.
Thank you. Right, reminder that only people in the room can vote. Right. Declarations of interest. The text for this is laid out on item 3 of the agenda. Do any of any members have a disclosable interest, disclosable pecuniary interest, or an affected interest to declare? No, that's good. Right, Deputy Mayor, has anyone online got any interest to declare?
No one online, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Right, we move straight on to item 3, the Council's financial plans and revenue budgets. I have to remind you all that in line with the Council budget procedure rules, there are no questions of clarification either before or after they speak, and no provision for them in the debate that will follow. Right, would the Cabinet member for Finance and Corporate Improvement will be invited to speak first, and will have 15 minutes to present the budget and move the recommendations. The finance spokesman from each opposition group will be invited to speak in order of the size of the political group for up to 10 minutes. Right, Councillor Neil, would you like to speak from your seat or from the lectern?
From my seat, please, Madam Mayor.
Right. Right, so who is going to... Sorry, we don't need a second yet, do we? Do we have a seconder for...
I will second that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thought we did that afterwards. Right. Right, would you like to speak now, Councillor Neil?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight we will discuss the proposed budget for 2025-26, including the capital, revenue and council tax proposals, which together form this administration's proposed spending, efficiencies and income needed to reach a balanced budget position. I want to start by thanking the 135 respondents to the budget consultation that ran from the 11th of December to the 22nd of January, and all those who attended our in-person engagement events. It's important that we hear from residents, and this administration is committed to wide public engagement. I am pleased that this has been another opportunity to take the council out to residents, and the responses of feedback have helped shape a budget that reflects our community's priorities. The council continues to face financial challenges, including inflationary pressures, increased service demands and uncertainty in funding. For next year, our rolling base budget, excluding schools, is set to decrease slightly to £97.3 million before considering inflation. Total budget pressures amount to £8.4 million, which is driven by demand for social care and new legal requirements. We have identified £5.3 million in savings, focusing on efficiency, income generation and support service reductions, resulting in a budget gap of 4.1 million before an increase in council tax is factored in. Our general reserves remain relatively healthy and estimated to be £9.85 million by March 2025. This has been achieved by hard work across the organisation to manage spending in the current year within the approved budget. I'm advised that we are on track to do this, but we must not be complacent. We have been helped in our 25-26 budget by some improvements to our expected funding position, announced in the local government finance settlement and the policy statement that preceded this. The government has managed to find more money to support social care than was announced in the Chancellor's autumn statement. This is welcome news, since the pressures we are facing in adult social care in particular continue to grow. Funding for the extended producer requirement waste scheme was also a helpful boost. The future of the scheme beyond 25-26 is not yet clear, but additional funding of over £2.3 million has certainly made a big difference to Bracknell Forest and other councils. This is just one of the many uncertainties we face in planning our budgets for 26-27 and beyond. It is unarguable that the previous government oversaw a period from 2010 when its funding reductions were particularly acute in areas with higher deprivation and lower council tax bases. Analysis undertaken by the respected Institute for Fiscal Studies clearly demonstrates this. The current government has clearly recognised this and has signalled its intent to reverse it. All councillors will have seen the response I submitted on behalf of Bracknell Forest to the future funding consultation, which was circulated last week by the Executive Director for Resources. The proposed principles for reform, which largely mirror those published over 5 years ago by the previous government, are hard to argue against. However, I have argued that any changes should be gradually phased in over time to avoid placing additional financial burdens on well-managed councils like Bracknell Forest, which has a long track record of prudent financial management. I will continue to push this message on our council's behalf as further details of possible changes are published. Looking in more detail at next year's budget, our capital programme proposals are for 25-26 to 27-28, and for next year equate to £14.386 million, including £8.388 million funded by the council and £5.998 million from external sources such as government grants, Section 106 contributions, capital receipts and borrowing. The capital programme emphasises maintaining critical infrastructure while balancing fiscal responsibility and community needs. The council aims to manage ageing assets, fund essential services and invest in sustainability initiatives within the constraints of available funding. The consultation responses showed strong public support for our proposals, with nearly 80% of respondents agreeing with spending £2.7 million on our borough's roads, which is supported by the Integrated Transport Block and other grants. The other key priorities in the programme are £1.5 million allocated to address the most urgent property maintenance needs, £1.298 million provisionally allocated for new school places under the Basic Needs Grant, and £500,000 allocated for housing stock maintenance, particularly for homelessness support. There are also encouraging consultation responses in other areas, as the proposals are directly in support of our council plan, including residents having a safe and affordable place to live and delivering a green and sustainable environment. 71% of respondents agreed with investing £500,000 in council properties used mainly for temporary accommodation to keep them safe and secure for residents. 79% agreed with spending £100,000 on environmental work to stop some of our ponds, streams and wetland areas from becoming flooded and harming wildlife and biodiversity. 69% agreed with investing £445,000 in South Hill Park on essential maintenance to help keep the building and Wild Theatre running. And 52% of respondents supported investing £445,000 as the first phase of a programme to make council buildings more energy efficient and reduce their impact on the environment, in line with the borough's net zero ambitions. We do have an increased reliance on borrowing for the programme, which is a fine balance to strike. We have to be careful not to put further pressure on the revenue budget whilst properly maintaining our assets. And I am pleased that the consultation responses echo support for these investments. I'm confident that these proposals represent the investment in areas that matter to residents and maintain our assets with the appropriate funding sources. The proposed flexible use of capital receipts will also allow us to continue with our important business change programme to support our agreed council plan. Our business change strategy will directly deliver important efficiencies and savings that we need to maintain our financial position. Therefore, being able to fund this programme through the flexible use of capital receipts is a core component of the capital proposals and our medium-term financial strategy. The picture of local government finances has not materially changed, and we continue to need to balance providing the standards and services residents of Bracknell Forest are accustomed to and making decisions that are in line with our spending power. There continue to be headwinds and uncertainty, and the proposals we have put forward account for these. Furthermore, anticipated changes in local government funding allocation beginning in 26-27 will reduce future income for Bracknell Forest. So this year is about setting a budget that will set us up well now and into the future, and not making any decisions we may come to regret. This year, over 63% of respondents told us they generally agree with the proposed revenue budget savings, and 50% said they agree or strongly agree with the Council's proposals to increase spending in specific areas. 63% of respondents said they support increasing the charge for the garden waste brown bin service by £5, so the scheme becomes self-funding by the end of 25-26. 62% agree that the grounds maintenance work should focus on essential tasks like highway safety rather than appearance-related work to save £15,000 a year. 63% support reducing the number of parking machines at the Lookout and the Avenue car parks, and 80% support the Council's approach to promoting independence for adults through early intervention and prevention and using assistive technology. This Council has committed to tackle climate change by achieving net zero emissions by 2030 or as close as possible thereafter. We have recently consulted on a new climate change strategy that sets out our approach to achieving this objective. These efforts go far beyond what our council can deliver alone, and we will need to engage the help of residents and businesses to achieve the step change needed. We also need to demonstrate our commitment tangibly by investing in our own infrastructure, skills and capacity. In addition to our capital investment proposals, we have also included a sum of £250,000 in our revenue budget proposals. This will help secure extra resources, both internal and external, to support delivery of our climate change action plan. This is a large financial commitment for Bracknell Forest, and one that shows we are really serious about making a difference to the future of our planet. The other area I would like to highlight where we are responding to demographic and societal changes is in adult social care. This is normally our largest budget pressure, and 25-26 is no different. The extra funding we are proposing for adult social care packages totals over £6.5 million, an increase of 14% taking into account service pressures, the corporate contingency and inflation. This clearly demonstrates this administration's commitment to helping the most vulnerable people in our community when they need us to do so. Despite a relatively generous finance settlement, increases in government funding have never been sufficient to fund all the pressures we face. We know that an increase in any tax is never welcome and have given great thought to the proposed 4.99% council tax increase. In order to reach a balanced budget position, taking account of the government grant we will receive and the council tax referendum rules, it is clear that a 4.99% increase to council tax is the only reasonable path we can take. When we look to our own circumstances, the services we must provide, as well as the standards that Bracknell Forest residents expect, and the uncertainties we look to the future, we have to take decisions that will provide us with the stability and strong foundations we need as we head into 26-27. The 4.99% increase represents £1.55 per week on a Band D property, and Bracknell Forest still represents one of the lowest council tax charges in the country. We firmly believe this is offering residents good value for money. We also recognise that some residents may require additional help, and our proposal to fund a further council tax discount through the S13A scheme addresses this. Whilst 55% of respondents agreed with the council providing financial support for the borough's lowest income households, comments suggested that we should also look at addressing the root cause of hardship. And when we are out talking to residents and on the doorstep, we often hear that we should be able to better support those who need more financial help but are not entitled to council tax support. Since the eligibility threshold for council tax support has been frozen for some years, an increasing number of households are finding themselves earning just above the threshold and therefore becoming responsible for paying the full council tax bill. At this time, when these households get into council tax arrears, they will be expected to contact Revenue Services and arrange an affordable payment plan. Revenue Services is able to provide some financial advice and support to these households, but this is currently limited. So I am pleased that in order to enable a more holistic and positive approach to supporting households just above the council tax support threshold, we plan to increase the S13A budget by £88,000 and are proposing an extra member of staff to be able to support those residents both financially and with specific financial advice to the household. This will ensure that the circumstances leading to them accruing significant arrears are not repeated. This will be on a trial basis for 1 year and funded from the Financial Hardship Reserve. We also plan to retain our council tax support scheme to offer all working age council tax support claimants a £50 discount on their council tax bill. Together, these measures mean we are able to provide targeted and meaningful support to those who need it. I'm delighted to endorse the proposals in this report to Council, and I'm confident that what we have proposed is in the best interest of the residents of Bracknell Forest. It maintains a prudent approach to managing our budget and delivering quality services to residents. We cannot escape the uncertainty and pressures of the current environment, but we do have a strategy in our council plan, and this budget underpins how we are delivering that now and into the future. I believe, Madam Mayor, that this is a balanced and fair budget, and I am happy to propose it to Council as set out in recommendations 2.1 to 3.6 on pages 3 to 9 of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. Councillor Templeton, would you now second it for me, please?
I'll formally second, but I'll defer my speech.
Yes, I was going to ask you to. Thank you. Right. Councillor Allen, would you now like to come to the lectern or speak from your seat?
I'm happy to do it from my seat, thank you.
Fine, thank you. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Councillor Neil has highlighted most of the positives in this budget, so I'm not going to go over those again. But I have to say, we have little choice but to support the 4.99% increase because, and we're going to pick on a few numbers to highlight why this is necessary. Adult social care costs. For every 1% increase we get in council tax, we get an extra 816k from our residents. 4.99% is just over 4 million, 4,071,000 to be precise. On the face of it, it looks like the increase in adult social care costs this year, taking in pressures and government funding, etc., pressures and savings, will be about 3.6 million. But it's actually more than that. When you add in the inflationary increase to cover the uplift in charges from the private sector providers, to cover the minimum wage and national insurance increases, and then also add in around 40% of the generic inflation number, then the total increase is higher, significantly higher than 4 million, which is bigger, more money than we're getting in extra council tax. This means that every penny we spend, every penny we get from our residents this year is being spent purely on adult social care. So we're not just using the 2% adult social care precept, but the other 2.99% as well. This is not sustainable. This means that every other service in the council is having to make savings to satisfy the voracious appetite of the adult social care budget. The only positive news in this is the Executive Director of Resources reassures me that some of this increase is to make up for the fact that we did not make large enough increases in previous years. I pray that we do not see a similar situation next year. Moving on to the national insurance increase. The government commitment made in October last year to cover the public sector national insurance increase has not been entirely met. It only covers 85% of our costs, so there's a shortfall of £180,000. That's equivalent to about 3 or 4 posts within the council. It will also not cover the hit we take from taking from the increase in our costs from our private sector suppliers. Unlike some councils who employ their own staff to cover their adult social care needs, Bracknell Forest relies mainly on the private sector for this. Councils that have their own staff will be covered, but those that use the private sector will not. Since the budget consultation, the generic inflationary figure in the budget has been increased to cope with this, an extra 800k. Additionally, what happens next year, because the government have covered most of the national insurance costs this year, but what will happen next? Moving on to extended producer responsibilities. Well, what's this I hear? I hear you ask. Well, this is to do with improving recycling. For more information, you can Google simpler recycling in England for more details. Basically, from going forwards, we'll be requiring 4 containers, not the 3 that we currently have. Paper and card will be put in one bin, and all the other recyclates will go in another. Initially, we're getting another 2.3 million from the government, but we're budgeting only to use 100k of that while we work out how on earth we're going to implement the scheme. This is a one-off payment, and it's a nice buffer for 25-26, but not all the costs are yet known, which is why we're only spending 100k to find out. By the end of March 2026, we'll need to include glass and add soft plastics by the end of March 2027 to our doorstep collections. The government website states that by the end of March 2025, they will deliver the money to every council to handle the transition to household food waste collections. So that possibly means that 2.3 million they've just given us is to cover the food waste which we've already implemented. I do hope that's the case, because it's not ring-fenced money, which means we can use it for anything. The worst case scenario is that this has to cover the entire cost of changes going forwards, including new bins, glass collection at the doorstep, and this has not been included in this budget thus far. So I do hope there's some flexibility in the terms and conditions of this scheme. So this extra 2.2 million of funding is the primary reason we haven't had to dip into the general reserve this year. But we have used 60% of the business rate revaluation reserve, using 3.7 million, and also used 75% of our future funding reserve, with only £500,000 left. Just going back to the budget consultation, there was a comment in the Liberal Democrats' response to the budget which described the previous administration's £80 million purchase of commercial properties as speculative. This comment cannot go unanswered. Unlike some councils, we set out rigorous criteria from the outset, so we were very careful about what we invested in. In this financial year, the usable revenue from these properties, over and above the cost of the loans, was 3.5 million. Since 2018, these properties have assisted in the council's budget to the tune of 24 million. Given our general reserves are less than half that number, I'll leave you to guess the scale of the cuts that we would have had to make over the past 8 years to keep our head above water. We were glad to see that the discretionary business rate relief policy, which was mooted in the December budget, has been removed for the time being while further consultations with the charities are made. Just remember, this is the calm before the storm. As per paragraph 3.6.1, it says, in the policy statement, the government confirmed its commitment to reforming the local government funding system and redistributing funding to ensure that it reflects an up-to-date assessment of needs and local resources, as Councillor Neil has already said. So in the 26-27 budget, when the government redistributes council funding around the country, it is expected that the funding in Bracknell Forest will be reduced by several percentage points. I will finish with the fact that the Conservative group have proposed a small amendment to the budget, which I will talk about when we get to that part of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Forster, would you... Sorry. Do we have to second that? No. Councillor Forster, would you like to speak from your seat or from the lectern?
Oh, I'm coming to the lectern.
Okay, good for you.
The Liberal Democrat group welcomes the Cabinet's continued commitment to a thorough public consultation on the draft budget for the financial year 25-26. And we thank you for the greater assistance that officers have given us this year. We also recognise and welcome the late change to the budget to provide more council tax support to the most vulnerable households. This is most welcome. In our debate on last year's budget, I referred to the difficulties in steering between a rock and a hard place in order to achieve a balanced budget. The picture was grim. Expenditure was unavoidably increasing, government funding was tight, and our reserves were set to continually decline. The same sort of picture has been put forward in earlier years. Looking at the wider local government scene, we are seeing more and more councils in dire financial trouble, and the future holds many pressures and uncertainties for us all. It is therefore surprising that the budget we are being asked to approve today paints a more optimistic outlook than we expected. The rock and the hard place appear to have diminished somewhat, and that relentless decline in our reserves, which has been a constant concern to us, has slowed somewhat. The Liberal Democrat group has no wish to look a gift horse in the mouth, but there are two main issues which concern us. Firstly, balancing the budget relies heavily on achieving savings on demand-led services, particularly on adult and children's services. Yet the council cannot control the number of people who come along asking for these services in much the same way as an NHS hospital cannot control the number of people turning up at the door of A&E. The reality is that we have an ageing population and many people are not working owing to sickness, and hospitals still have difficulty discharging patients because the social care packages that they need have not been put in place by councils. So if the estimates on which the budget rests are slightly wide of the mark, in practice, the contingency reserve could quickly be used up. This budget needs a strong health warning to recognise there is inherent uncertainty built into it. Second point, looking after our frail and elderly residents is a hugely important responsibility for this council. Major savings of £458,000 are anticipated on adult social care because we are told there will be alternative and cheaper services provided to residents. We support the drive for early intervention and the promotion of independent living, but we are concerned about how the savings will be perceived by current users of adult social care services. The risk is that we will be seen as just cost-cutting and giving a reduced service. We trust that this will be handled sensitively and that service users will be reassured that this will not manifest itself in an inferior service provision for those individuals. Just turning to the details in the budget. The Liberal Democrat group is disappointed that the observations and requests that we made in our response to the draft budget have been overlooked. We do not think this is best practice. Opposition groups have the right to express their views and have them responded to. So I'm asking the Cabinet to commit to send me their response to each of the points we made in our consultation response. And in view of the time limit for this speech, I'm just going to draw attention to two of the points which have not been addressed in the report for us. Firstly, we challenge the under-provision for essential maintenance of the Council's property assets, yet this has not changed. The report before us acknowledges that not all essential maintenance is being provided for, and I quote, "The implications of failing to maintain buildings are progressive deterioration leading to potential building closures, health and safety problems, service delivery impacts, and reduced property values." This doesn't make any sense. And we can see the proof of this lack of prudence to maintain assets by the expensive proposals now needed to replace windows at South Hill Park. We also asked for consideration to be given to the provision of a public toilet in the Sandhurst Library and other libraries where appropriate. We are sure that this would be really valued by residents and enhance the usability of libraries as warm refuges for people struggling to afford to heat their homes and to become a true community place. It is actually astounding that the number of public toilets in our borough have fallen to just one when we have 125,000 residents, and their number is increasing all the time. The Cabinet must focus on delivering the basic essential public services which our residents have a right to expect. I'm going to just offer a view to my Conservative colleagues who mentioned the word speculative. The word I would use to address you is calamitous, and that is what you have done to public service funding over the last 14 years. Please reflect on that rather than on a word which looks at an investment proposal that you put forward. Returning to the budget finally. That all being said, we will be voting for this budget. While there are areas of concern which I've articulated, we believe the underpinning assumptions, while carrying some risk, are fair. We believe that this budget gives Bracknell Forest a stable foundation for future funding settlements, and we will be supporting it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Forster. Would Councillor Hafferty like to speak from his chair or lectern? Sorry, not
in the chair, please.
in the chair. Sorry, I thought it was going to be Councillor Hafferty. Councillor Collins then.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The second budget of the Green Group's term in office sees a continuing significant pressures on local government spending, not only in Bracknell, but across the country too. The council continues to be impacted by the cost of living crisis, inflation, the cost of social care, local issues such as our participation in the safety valve programme. We would again like to thank officers for their hard work in responding to these pressures and their dedication to the budget process. We would also like to thank officers and cabinet members for their time in answering our budget queries. Following a largely successful budget consultation last year, it was perhaps a little disappointing to see a decrease in the number of responses received to the consultation this year, though this is likely to have been reflective of the less contentious nature of the proposals. It must be said that the consultation responses were largely positive. Adrian and I joined Councillor Temperton in Warfield and Councillor Gilby in Binfield in January to help promote the budget consultation with residents who do appreciate the opportunity to engage. We have been pleased to learn that Bracknell Forest Council's finances for 2024-25 are now looking much better than expected midway through the year, and we accept that the maximum level of council tax increase permitted must be applied to give the greatest level of protection for the future. It is worth noting that our council tax, as has already been mentioned, is one of the lowest of any unitary authority in the country. We welcome the continued support for our most vulnerable residents with their council tax bills and those households with income only largely above the current benefit threshold. Investment in council-owned property is important and used mainly for temporary accommodation to ensure they remain safe and secure for residents. Increased provision at Larchwood, the council's short-term break children's home, which provides personalised respite care for children who have complex needs, is again welcomed. This includes the installation of air conditioning so that the risk of seizures in some of the children with epilepsy is not increased during hot weather. I visited Larchwood for the first time at Christmas and was very impressed with the facilities and care provided, and look forward to seeing those improving again in the future. We also welcome the continued spending on road repairs and improvements, which are very much needed as our infrastructure ages in the borough. The investment in essential maintenance for South Hill Park, roof repairs and external window and door replacements in the Wild Theatre will keep this fantastic local asset available for residents. The funding of environmental works will make council buildings more energy efficient and reduce their impact on the environment in line with the council's declared climate emergency, and will lead to savings in the longer term. The upgrade to windows in the old Magistrate Court building, for example, the building which is used by Involve and various other community groups, is a particularly welcome example of this improvement. Anyone who has visited there will know just how cold the building can be during the winter months and how difficult it is to heat. Flood prevention measures at some of the council's ponds, streams and wetland areas will help to prevent flooding elsewhere. But most of all, being Greens, we welcome the investment in our council's climate change team. We ourselves were elected to the Binfield North and Warfield West ward with a pledge to pressurise Bracknell Forest Council to achieve net zero across all areas of responsibility as soon as possible, stating that its commitment to carbon neutrality by 2050 was not soon enough. Thankfully, this council declared a climate emergency in 2023, with an ambitious target to reach net zero by 2030 or as close as possible to then. Since then, Office have developed a comprehensive climate change strategy to replace the previous strategy. However, to deliver against the new strategy will require more resource than is currently available. We find it hard to believe that others are considering a reduction to the proposed expenditure for climate change, especially as an increased pace of action will bring benefits to our residents, including reducing their costs and mitigating the impact of climate change, such as flooding and high temperatures. It will also enable that team to look for additional external funding for projects. The CBI has recently reported Britain's net zero economy is growing 3 times faster than the overall UK economy, providing high-wage jobs across the country while cutting climate heating emissions and increasing energy security. Our climate change action in Bracknell Forest can only help support this increasingly important business sector and should be welcomed by all. We accept the need to allocate funding for works resulting from National Government's devolution white paper, but hope that government will recognise that funding of this work must not be borne by local authorities alone, when most, if not all, are already struggling to balance their budgets. We are disappointed that funding provided by national government does not fully compensate for the council's increase employers' national insurance contributions and does not in any way compensate for the increases being experienced by our suppliers. We appreciate the savings must be made and the Council's approach to promoting independence for adults through early intervention and using assistive technology to help people live as independently as possible is welcomed. Purchasing care home places is the more expensive option. We also welcome the increase in fees for 2 of our optional council schemes, which has already been mentioned, and the various parking proposals, providing there is no impact on visitors. We know that further consideration of the local discretionary business rate relief scheme for charities is already taking place, and I'm sure the results will be coming out soon. In conclusion, Madam Mayor, the Green Group has considered the budget proposals for 2025-26 and will be supporting the Cabinet's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Now, I have been given, Councillor Allen has given notice of an amendment. Would you like to propose that amendment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to propose the amendment which is on the agenda supplement papers, which basically is the same as the previous recommendations, except there's a minor change in item 2-2, item 1.
Right, thank you. Councillor Neil and Councillor Templeton, are you? Sorry, Councillor Barnard, would you like to second that motion?
I'm happy to second that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Right, sorry. Before we carry on, would Councillor Templeton and Councillor Neil accept that?
No, Madam Mayor, we don't accept the amendment.
Thank you. In that case, Councillor Barnard, would you like to speak now or would you like to reserve?
My understanding is, doesn't Councillor Allen have the opportunity to propose his amendment? And in any event, I will reserve seconding.
Okay. Councillor Allen, would you now like to speak to the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. As you'll be aware, the town centre is split between 2 owners. BRP owns the Lexicon, the rest belongs to Bracknell Forest Council. Last year, we reduced the town centre cleaning bill for the council-owned parts by £46,000. This reduced the contract staff from 4 to 2 and reduced the days of operation to 5 days a week. As the Executive Director for Resources put it, having 4 people was the gold standard. Having 2 meets the minimum requirement and puts it on a par with the rest of the borough. However, the town centre is not like the rest of the borough. The footfall is many times higher, so it accumulates more litter. In hindsight, this was a retrograde step and the funding needs to be restored. Walking through litter-strewn streets is not a great advert for Bracknell. It's not what our residents expect, and it's likely to put off potential businesses that may wish to locate here. We need to attract new businesses, not push them away. We need to get the fundamentals right before we start spending money in other discretionary areas. Now, I'm actually ambivalent as to where this money comes from. If someone can suggest a more suitable pot to take it from at this late stage, then feel free. However, for the purposes of the amendment, I had to take it from somewhere to keep a balanced budget. The 250k for climate change is not just for the 1 year. This pot is to hire 3 staff, one of which is an apprentice. These are not temporary posts, they're permanent. To date, I have not seen any defined deliverables for this. Is there an invest to save proposal here? There is no guarantee that we will have the money in future years to cover these roles. The Conservative group are not against climate change. In fact, we set up the first climate change group several years ago under Councillor Tony Virgo. But we do need to see a proper justification for any spend which has not been visible as yet. You could temporarily take 55k from the climate change budget now, and then you have a couple of months to find the 55k from somewhere else. And then you could via it later. Here's another possibility, though a little off the wall. If you could get 2% of the households in the borough to put their landfill bin out twice a year instead of every 3 weeks, you could save enough money in landfill and incineration costs to cover the 55k. Impossible, I hear you say. Well, last year I put my bin out twice. Once in January and once in August. Oh, and if you don't believe me, I have photographic evidence of that. And in fact, CETA go round with their van has a camera on it. So if they keep the video for 18 months, you can go back and check. I meticulously reuse and recycle. I have bins in the garage for metals, electricals, fabrics, plastics, soft plastics, pill packets, etc. Some of this goes to Longshot, the rest to supermarkets. Most of what goes in my landfill bin is dust from the vacuum cleaner and the contents of the bathroom bins. Note that I have no pets and no kids at home. I do have other people in the house, other than my wife. This is about setting an example for our residents. If I can do this, I'm sure there are other people in the borough that can do it. In fact, I would challenge any councillor to try it. Meanwhile, we can begin to get the town centre looking spick and span. I urge you to support this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Barnard, you said you wanted to reserve.
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
Correct. Thank you. Is there any councillor in the room would like to speak to them? Speak. Councillor. Sorry. Virgo. Councillor Virgo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I find myself in a dilemma here, Madam Mayor. Political dilemma, of course. I absolutely believe that climate change should be part of this council, and I am pleased to see that the leader and this present regime have put some effort into it. And the reason I say that is because, I don't know if people have said this, but if we don't get more officers to do the work, we can't get the grants to do the projects. And it's as simple as that. If we're going to have a bond or we're going to do the solar farm, we need to get that going. And let's face it, the solar farm's been sitting there for some years. I absolutely do agree, Madam Mayor, that we need the town centre clean. And I have to say this because a friend of mine said to me, I would rather come to Bracknell because it is basically clean as against other towns I won't mention. But that has to be maintained, Madam Mayor, and I find that absolutely essential that we put resources into making this place clean, as indeed some of the outer parishes now are looking pretty litter-torn. So, in essence, I could support this, but there are other areas to take the money from, and if you look at the advertiser on this council for jobs, it battles up to about £800,000 that hasn't been filled, and so I would suggest we take it from that. So I'm in a dilemma, but I wanted to say that so members understood my position. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Purnell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will not be supporting this amendment tonight. I'm in the town centre every weekend and I scan streets as I'm walking along, looking for anything that needs reporting. And I know a lot of council officers do that too on their lunch break. But no amount of residents' money is going to stop people from littering. I've also spoken to colleagues in the town council who are based on the high street, and they have said that in the morning there is litter from those that are frequenting the town in the evening, but they tell us that this is very quickly being cleared away. By mid-morning it's all gone and it's all tidy again. The town centre is still held to a high standard and is also subjected to regular inspections, and these are every 2 weeks. These inspections have always passed. This council unanimously voted to reduce the town centre cleansing schedule just 12 months ago, and it is clear that this was the right decision to make. The only issue which I've picked up is the amount of chewing gum that is stuck to the floor. Unfortunately, the machine that our contractor uses broke down. However, it was repaired just this morning and has been out and about, so I'm sure that when I go back into town this weekend, I will see a marked improvement. I think the pertinent issue here is who thinks it's acceptable to discard their chewing gum on the floor, and an educational campaign will be forthcoming to make people think twice about doing so. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other... Oh, right, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This budget toes a fine line due to the significant financial pressures faced by the council. However, I believe one of the greater achievements of this budget is that we are genuinely putting our money where our mouths are and making significant contributions towards our climate change commitments. Climate change is the single greatest challenge facing this planet. As a father of 2 young children, I'm proud to serve on a council which is pioneering in our response on this issue, seeking to do all that we are able to leave the world in a better condition for future generations. In years to come, I believe that the efforts we are making now in Bracknell Forest, in this chamber, will be looked upon as a leading example of how local government can play a part and turn the tide in this most existential of challenges. Whilst I do not object to increased spending on cleaning the lexicon and generally keeping our public spaces well looked after, I cannot think of a single worst part of the budget to raid to pay for this. For this reason, I cannot support the Conservative amendment, and I urge my colleagues likewise to oppose this.
Thank you. Sorry,
Thank you,
Councillor Haffordge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. During the September 2023 council meeting, we declared a climate emergency. The Conservative group correctly stated that climate change was going to happen faster and faster and faster. They mentioned the urgency and the vital importance of delivering a robust response to climate change. They said that the decisions we made then were not just for the next 6 months, the next financial year, but the next 5, 10, 15 and so on years. These quotes are all taken from that meeting. It's all there, recorded on YouTube. They said, let's get on this journey, let's pull together on this, saying their group were fully supportive on what we can do in taking this forward in this council. Climate change hasn't stopped or slowed down, and neither has our response to this. Our officers have produced an inspiring new climate change strategy, which is recently back from being out for consultation. The full online consultation has seen good support from those that replied. All of us members have had many opportunities to feed into this strategy. The climate change budget proposal is the cost for the delivery plan for that strategy. Once again, the strategy that we've all had a chance to input into. I don't understand why now, having previously stated that we're so supportive of our climate change activities, having fed into the emerging strategy, that they are now proposing amendments, pulling back and dropping down a gear from the urgent and robust climate actions that they were previously suggesting. I have asked officers about the proposed expenditure. The proposed climate change budget item is needed to finance the actions we have all seen in the climate change delivery plan. It includes officers dedicated to implementing the new strategy, that is identifying, securing funding for and supporting the delivery of the detailed projects and action items. They will ensure climate change is embedded throughout all other teams in the council and also monitor and report against achievement of the strategy. Separate officers will also be needed to cover the energy and engagement priorities of this strategy. These will plan and implement retrofit and local and community energy and decarbonisation initiatives, from finding funding and building partnerships through to managing the project. These officers will also manage climate engagement with the wider community, supporting education and the development of action projects. As the Conservatives previously stated for this initiative, let's reach out to the residents and encourage them to go further. We need these budget items to do that. Having read the Climate Change Strategy Delivery Plan and seen all the numerous actions and deliverables that are being planned, many of which are pump prime, essentially investor save, I'm convinced that the proposed level of funding for climate change is as stated. We will not be supporting this amendment, which aims to water down the priorities from when we all unanimously declared a climate emergency. During the 2023 election, we took the top 2 seats in our ward. We may have been new and slightly naive, but probably our key campaigning point was the need to increase climate action within the council and the community. If not for our rugged good looks, then this is probably what we were elected on. I mean, flip, even in words where we Greens stood and didn't actively campaign in, such as the Winkfield and Warfield East, we attained a really good showing. Perhaps there are other reasons, but I feel this was because some residents knew that with Greens you would get strong climate and environment action. They want the council to address the climate problem.
You have a minute left.
Thank you, yeah. They want the council to address the climate problem. For this reason, I would like to ask to have a recorded vote on this amendment so that it is on the record who is wavering in their full support for our declared climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haffordge. Councillor Howison was next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let's look at some practical issues. First of all, hiring new people does take a bit of time, and they're not always in post for the 1st of April. So with the new climate change posts, it's quite likely the spend will only cut in part way through the year, and the entire budget there won't actually be needed in year 1. And let's face it, this Labour administration has let the standard of cleaning in our town centre slide. They slipped in a cut in the contract, and it shows. Tonight we've got a chance to fix it. Our amendment, a small investment to restore proper cleaning in the lexicon, isn't just about picking up litter or scraping gum off the pavement. It's about pride in our environment. It's about prosperity. It's about telling investors Bracknell's a great place, not mind the mess. Our town centre is the first thing people look at when they consider locating business in our town. Don't take my word for it. Walk out there tomorrow, see for yourselves. This isn't about efficiency, it's neglect. If we're not careful, Bracknell will go the same way as some other long-term Labour-run towns I could mention, but won't. I'll spare their blushes. And let's not slide down that path. Bracknell deserves better. Here's the stakes. Bracknell's regeneration needs to keep up the momentum. We made this a destination town. Shops, jobs, clean. Clean streets show confidence. A sparkling town centre tells business we've got our act together. It tells residents we value you and the place you live. So tell us the dirty town centres what residents want. You've had nearly 2 years to prove that you can govern. 2 years of overspending, excuses and slippage. We're done waiting. Support this amendment, restore the cleaning. Let's show Bracknell we're serious, or step aside for those who are. The choice is yours, but the town's watching.
Thank you. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm trying to work out whether members have misunderstood, misheard, accidentally or deliberately what Councillor Allen actually said. He made the point that we want to restore cleaning in the town centre. As to where the money comes from, that is a matter for this council to decide. And I think it's disingenuous for members to suggest that this is in some way connected to the Conservatives' wish to dilute the campaign to tackle climate change. We started tackling climate change before many members joined this council and became elected councillors in this chamber. So I don't think we need to take lessons from other councillors about the Conservative Party's commitment to climate change. What we are suggesting, as Councillor Allen has indicated, is work to keep the town centre clean, which I think our residents would expect, and find the money to cover the cost of that from one of the council's buckets. To be honest, that decision is in the hands of the Labour administration as to where that money comes from. But the key thing here is we wish to see the town centre kept clean and tidy. Now, I've been around long enough to have sat here year after year after year to hear the Labour councillors insist that every budget hole that had to be filled could be filled by reducing the cost of members' allowances. Now, we haven't put that forward because we don't believe in making cheap political gimmicks like that. However, the Labour Council, who campaigned for cutting members' allowances, could put that forward as part of their administration. Now, I would ask them to think about whether they want to do that. They've had 2 years to reduce the cost of members' allowances that they campaigned on year after year after year, and our residents can ask why they haven't implemented that and as soon as they became the administration. So I would urge you all, the administration of this council, to find the money to keep the town centre clean and also protect the climate change budget.
Thank you. Councillor Temperton.
Thank you. I would just like to say that members have voluntarily cut their allowances on this council, and we've saved £30,000 last year, and it's in the budget again that it's expected that it will be at least 30,000 in this next one. The amendment on the board was the amendment set in, and that clearly says, if I can read it, a compensation reduction made to the climate change pressure. So your recommendation or your suggestion when you put in the amendment was certainly to climate change. I will not be supporting this. We all hate litter. I spend a lot of my time picking up other people's throwaways. I would like to pay tribute, though, and thank all those residents who have registered on the Take Pride initiative in Bracknell Forest and regularly clear up after others across Bracknell Forest, not just in the town centre. Since the last budget, when we actually cut the cleaning of the budget for the cleaning of the town centre, we have watched with care and the effect of this decision, checking on the litter dropped in the town centre areas. As stated recently, due to machinery breakdown, we have noticed an increased amount of gum. This is what leaves that white circles everywhere, even when the actual gum is swept up. I'm pleased to report the chewing gum machine is now fixed, and our contractors will make this a priority for the next few weeks. I should also stress that when inspections are made, and they are made very regularly, we have reached the necessary standards both contractually and legally. We cannot afford to have an increase in resource in this area walking about to catch those that litter. Most of our residents have never dropped litter in their lives. Why should they pay and reward those who are too idle to bin their waste? The climate change emergency requires us all to take responsibility for all we are doing to affect these changes. We need to take ownership. Our litter droppers need persuading of the costs they are causing us all. We need behaviour change, not just mopping and cleaning up after them. Our climate change strategy includes finances to support education and promotion. We need to be out there talking to these people as we regularly do in the areas we are around when we're doing litter picking. We need to persuade all to have pride in our place. So money is not just spent with no sustainable solution. We are wasting a lot of money every year on cleaning up after our residents. Some of our residents, a few.
Thank you, Councillor Temperton. Councillor Frost.
Thank you. The main point I was going to raise, I think, has already been covered by Councillor Temperton very well, in that given that Councillor Allen seems ambivalent as to where the money could come from, and Councillor Harrison reiterated the Conservative support for climate policies. But the amendment itself specifically takes the money from the climate change pressure. I struggle to see how they could support their own amendment in that, given what they've said. We all take pride in our town centre. I live very centrally, and we all want to see it as clean and bright as possible, with lots of businesses in the town centre, lots of footfall and entertainment options. I don't quite recognise the picture that Councillor Harrison painted of a potential war zone when I walk through the town centre. I think the issue might be a little bit overstated, but of course we all take the issue of litter very seriously. But I don't think, given that and what the Conservative group have said, I don't think it warrants taking an axe to the climate change pressure, which is a key pillar upon which this Labour administration was elected. And I think it does undermine somewhat, the Conservative group's stated commitment, in that as soon as you need to put money and resource behind it, they seem to get cold feet. But I think that there is also an issue here in that a key part of the climate change strategy is waste reduction, recycling, reuse, which in itself, with the extra resource from officers, would result in reduced waste in the town centre. Should the climate change strategy be successful, that would be a visible result of that. So to take money from that to put into cleaning, I think you're kind of creating a sort of circle of issues. So I can't support this amendment, and it doesn't sound like the Conservative group that proposed it are particularly strongly in favour of it themselves. So I'll be voting against. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak? Councillor.
Should we just ask Councillor Welch first? If she...
There's a gentleman at the end back there.
That's Councillor Barnard. Do you want to ask online if Councillor Welch wants to speak?
Yeah, we'll... Online want to speak?
No, no one wishes to speak.
Okay, so in that case, Councillor Barnard, would you like to?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The town centre has been a very long journey for this council, and after many, many years of hard work, we managed to get the regeneration through. It was a very, very close run thing, and for those of us members that were at the time, I remember 11:59 p.m, just before various options expired, when we actually got that over the line. And what made it happen then was because BRP, the Lexicon, were able to persuade many businesses and others that Bracknell Forest was a can-do place and could be a good home for their businesses. As a consequence, the sums stacked up and building work begun. Now let's be clear. What this amendment about in terms of town centre cleaning isn't just about picking up litter. Far from it. It's picking up litter from bins which were overfilled, because in the past there were 4 people working cleaning the town centre, which meant it was constantly being cleaned and maintained. And that's not just in the morning or at lunchtime, but that goes into the afternoon and the evening in the part of the town centre which is owned by Bracknell Forest. It's a small point, but fundamentally the Lexicon owns and pays for cleaning part of it. We own and pay for cleaning the rest of it. What has struck me on numerous occasions over the last year is that following the decision to reduce the cleaning, during a Saturday afternoon and at weekends, because we own the part of the town where there are more fast food outlets and things like that, the bins fill, overfill, and you end up with litter accumulating around them. And we all know that rubbish attracts rubbish. And if the bin is full, it's very, very difficult for somebody to put more rubbish in it. So they generally put it round it and down the side. So the point about this, it isn't just about sort of lecturing and hectoring people that don't pick up their rubbish. It's because it needs the constant cleaning. And we actually asked on the Executive Officer for Finance as to where, whether we could only maybe re-employ one person to actually do that. But no, it transpires that that's not possible, because to have that coverage, even in the event of sickness and absenteeism, you need it. Now, businesses in our town centre, as everywhere else, are going through a tough time as a result of Labour's budget last autumn. There's a huge... You might raise your eyes, Councillor Gilby, but a lot of part-time jobs and businesses, particularly smaller ones, are struggling. We've already got a few more going bankrupt in the town centre as it stands. So essentially, we have a situation where our town centre needs to be very well placed to attract visitors. It isn't at this point in time on a Saturday afternoon. If you were the owner of a chain of shops there and you went around at 4 or 5 o'clock on a Saturday or on a Sunday and saw the bins overfilled, the pigeons squabbling over the litter outside the bins, the rats, including a fairly large one we've nicknamed Boris down the way, and things like that, actually around about the place, it is challenging. Now, the difficulty is, and this is actually something that 14 residents plus at least 2 former and 1 current officers approached me since we put the amendment forward. If you allow the quality of your town centre cleanliness to deteriorate, it's difficult to get it back. Now, in your speech introducing the budget, Councillor Neil, you spoke about residents expect a high standard. Well, my gut feeling is they expect a high standard on cleanliness. One of the things I've found as a councillor over many years here is an element of pragmatism. I fully support measures to tackle climate change. I think we need to do a lot of persuasion. In fact, I think, Councillor Templeton, you make a good point. If we're going to educate and encourage people to not drop litter, we should be educating and encouraging them to sort of make carbon emitting changes and things like that. But because of the way the budget is set out and the complexity of other budget areas, it's very difficult to find ways of producing £55,000 from other established budgets. So the starting point in all cases is to find a balancing factor. I, like others at this point in time, would like to think that, even if people don't support the amendment tonight, they'll go away and think about ways of restoring that cleaning. We're facing challenges not just from surrounding areas, but towns and cities across the southeast of England to attract investment in the future. I want to keep Bracknell Forest looking good. That's something our residents...
You have 1 more minute.
Thank you. I'll actually be brief now. Our residents expect us to do this. The word I use is pragmatism. Let's get the basics right. Let's get our town centre looking and feeling good. And that pride in Bracknell Forest, I think, will give you greater engagement in climate change and other initiatives, because people will recognise that civic pride is alive and kicking in Bracknell Forest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnard.
By the way, I also wanted a recorded vote, but that's been asked for already.
It has been. Now, there's a proposal of the original motion. Sorry, Councillor Bidwell.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to answer a lot of comments that have been voiced by the opposition about encouraging business within the town centre. I can assure you that the litter to one side, the town centre has grown month on month, and in fact, as you all know, only last week, Dunhelm opened in the Prince's Square, an area which is cleaned, I believe, outside that by Bracknell Forest Council. It is not something that we want to see as overflowing bins, but I can assure you it's certainly not stopping businesses from relocating to the town centre. The lexicon has grown faster and better than any other town centre regeneration in Berkshire, even better than some of the ones in London. So we're doing a good job. The BRD are doing a good job. We're working with them to make sure that is sustainable. So can we please focus on the amendment and not the impact on business?
Madam Mayor, a point of order. Is it customary for members to speak after the seconder has reserved?
As a seconder can speak anywhere in the debate, I assumed it was, but...
I'll take it all back then.
The vote. Yes,
Madam Mayor, in advance of a previous council meeting, you sent out a significant list of do's and don'ts in council meetings. I was actually, on this particular basis, working on my understanding of the protocols we've established.
Excuse me, can we ask our solicitor to advise?
Thank you. Councillor Barnard, you're quite right. That was an error in process. That shouldn't have been allowed. Right. So that can be struck from the record.
I apologise.
Only if it's a point of order, if you want to raise a point of order.
Well, my point of order is that in the last few council meetings, these processes have been set out, and from my perspective, I think it's imperative that the person that sent them out and has directed us to follow them actually adheres to them.
As I said, it was an error in procedure, but we'll make sure it doesn't happen again.
Right, thank you. Right, we are now at the point where Bly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In 2023, this council unanimously declared a climate and biodiversity emergency and committed to achieving net zero emissions as close to 2030 as possible. In order to deliver on that, we have to invest, and reducing the proposed commitment by over 20% is not an option. Equally, in 2024, this council voted unanimously on the budget for this year, including the £46,000 saving to street cleansing. As we have heard this evening, despite some operational challenges with machinery, we are proud to maintain high standards in our town centre. Tonight we are here to set a balanced budget, as required by law. Councillor Allen and Councillor McLean will be aware that the proposed saving needs to come from the amendment tabled this evening and not speculate about where else it could come from at a later date. Rather than taking a short-term view and backtracking on a decision taken last year with little evidence to back up its need, the climate change investment is responsible and future-focused and will deliver long-term savings, cleaner air and a healthier community. The climate challenge is real, but with the right resources, we can change it into an opportunity for a greener, stronger future.
Thank you. Now, the amendment is set out on the screen for you. Councillor Haffajee has requested a recorded vote. So when your name is called, can you please turn on your microphones and speak clearly? Thank you.
Just a quick point of order. This is a budget meeting. The vote will be recorded regardless.
The main budget
Surely on the amendment it would also
is. We have looked at this today because I asked this specific question, but as it has been requested anyway, it will be taken. So, can those in support of the amended recommendation?
I'll read out.
The clerk will read out the names.
Okay, Councillor Allen,
For.
Councillor Bailey,
Against.
Councillor Barnard,
For.
Councillor Bidwell,
Against.
Councillor Brown,
Against.
Councillor Cochrane, Councillor Collins,
Against.
Councillor Eberly Christoph,
Against.
Councillor Tina Eberly,
Against.
Councillor Mike Foster,
Against.
Councillor Sophie Forrester,
Against.
Councillor Furrer,
Against.
Councillor Frost,
Against.
Councillor Gore,
For.
Councillor Gilby,
Against.
Councillor Happagee,
Against.
Councillor Harrison, Councillor Hayes, Councillor Jeffries,
Against.
Councillor Karam,
Against.
Councillor Mackenzie Boyle,
For.
Councillor McLean,
For.
Councillor Mawson, Councillor Neal,
Against.
Councillor Regan,
Against.
Councillor Penfold,
Against.
Councillor Pickering,
Against.
Councillor Pressland,
Against.
Councillor Pennell,
Against.
Councillor Robertson,
For.
Councillor Smith,
Against.
Councillor Templeton,
Against.
Councillor Thompson,
Against.
Against.
Councillor Philip Thompson, thank you. Councillor Virgo,
Abstain.
Councillor Watts,
Against.
Councillor Webb,
Against.
Councillor Wright,
Against.
Councillor Zavrudi,
Against.
Okay, it's fallen.
The amendment has fallen. We now return to the substantive motion, which was the original proposal. Right, so now.
Debate.
Right, so we now move to the debate. Councillor I was going to say, Councillor Templeton, do you wish to reserve or speak later?
For the main debate, I'm still deferring unless there's no one else wants to speak.
Right. Could we have hands up who would like? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a brief commentary on children's services. Nationally, councils are facing an unprecedented demand on core services, including children's social care and education. Supporting children and young people to remain with their families when it is safe to do so, and supporting families at points of crisis will always be our favoured approach. But there are times when we need to support children and young people directly through foster carer support or placements. We have continued to support children and young people in the community, many of whom are on the edge of care and receive intensive support from the Children's Social Care and Health Services. Whilst the number of children and young people being supported in foster care and residential placements has reduced, there continues to be a significant increase in the unit cost of those placements impacting on the budget. We continue to focus on improving our offer for foster carers to be able to support children with more challenging needs, whilst also ensuring that we are in line with the national agenda to ensure that family kinship carers are also appropriately supported. The increased cost of unaccompanied asylum seeker children is also outlined for investment following a review of the longer-term support required. The number of disabled children and children with special educational needs is increasing in Bracknell Forest, with a higher number of disabled children supported by the Children's Specialist Support Services. Capacity to support the increased number of disabled children in receipt of support has been recognised within the budget proposals, including increased short-break respite. The demand on education and learning services is also recognised within the budget, with additional investment in the educational psychology services and investment into redesign a number of home-to-school transport routes outlined in the proposal. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a brief summary on adult services. I would like to express my gratitude to the officers for their dedication in developing a budget framework that not only meets the needs of our community but also strives to keep the budget as balanced as possible for the year ahead. This has been a particularly challenging task, especially as local authorities have been under pressure for over 15 years to find efficiencies. At Bracknell Forest Council, we focused on generating income, making savings in central services and driving business transformation, all while safeguarding frontline services as much as possible. A substantial portion of our budget is allocated to children's and adult services, and that share continues to grow annually. This is due to our ageing population and the advances in healthcare that help children with additional needs live longer and require ongoing support. There is a noticeable rise in the demand for adult social care services, reflected in the increasing number of individuals requiring either short-term or long-term support. Additionally, as more children transition into adulthood, the need for services for young adults with high support needs continues to rise, often at a considerable cost. Adult services aim to provide information and advice, along with the use of technology and equipment that enable people to remain in their homes for longer, leading full and active lives. Where needed, short-term rehabilitation or reablement services are offered to help individuals regain their independence and continue living in their own homes for as long as possible. When we consulted the public on the budget, over 80% of respondents expressed support for the proposals to promote independence in adult social care. This was one of the highest levels of approval, second only to our plans for improving highways. Supporting family carers remains a growing priority within adult social care. Our goal is to increase the support available to carers through the implementation of an all-aged integrated carer strategy. For those who require long-term care, our aim continues to be to support people in their homes for as long as feasible. before considering residential or nursing care. The duration of time people are spending in long-term care has increased, and the ongoing pressure from high care costs, inflation and other financial costs continue to put a strain on the adult social care budget. Collaborating closely with our health partners to ensure appropriate resources are available to meet the health needs of both adults and children remains an essential focus. As a council, we are committed to delivering the best possible services for our residents, ensuring they can age with dignity, remain safe and enjoy a high quality life at every stage of their life. This is why I'm happy to support the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Bidwell.
Thank you. I would like to express my strong support for the financial plans and revenue budgets for 25-26. These proposals are not just numbers on a page, they represent our commitment to a financially stable, service-orientated and forward-thinking council that prioritises the well-being of our community. The budget before us today is built on foundation of responsible fiscal management. It outlines a general fund capital funding of 14.3686 million, with 8.388 million sourced from council resources and 5.998 million from external funds, including Section 106 contributions. These allocations ensure that we maintain and improve essential infrastructure, including schools, roads and public services, without burdening taxpayers beyond necessity. Furthermore, the capital programme for 25-26 to 27-28 prioritises long-term financial stability, ensuring that investment decisions are prudent, affordable and aligned with our community needs. This budget demonstrates our unwavering commitment to protecting the most vulnerable in our society. A substantial portion of our revenue budget, £40.64 million, is allocated to adult social care, reflecting the growing demand for these critical services. Additionally, we are enhancing support for low-income residents through a £50 council tax discount for working-age households receiving support, ensuring that financial hardships does not prevent access to essential services. This initiative underscores our values of fairness and inclusivity, ensuring that no one in our community is left behind. In a time of increasing financial pressure, this budget strikes a careful balance between maintaining frontline services and achieving cost efficiencies. Our savings strategy, which amounts to 5.3 million, focuses on operational efficiencies, digital transformation and reducing non-essential expenditures without undermining core public services. Moreover, the budget includes a £1 million allocation for investor save initiatives, promoting innovation and long-term cost reductions. This approach allows us to modernise our operations, improve service delivery and achieve long-term sustainability. A key strength of this budget is its foundation in public consultation and transparency. The Council conducted a robust engagement process from December 2024 to January 2025, ensuring that community voices were heard. We listened, we adapted, and we ensured that this budget reflects the priorities and concerns of the people we serve. Members, this budget is more than just a financial plan. It's a reflection of our values, our priorities, and our responsibility to the residents of our borough. It ensures fiscal responsibility, protects essential services, and lays the groundwork for a resilient and thriving community. I urge you all to support this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Bidwell. Councillor Barnard. Sorry, Councillor Barnard.
Thank you very much. As has been said already by my colleague, Councillor Allen, there's a lot of good things in this budget, but let's just put a bit of a reality check here for the future. Councillor Neal, in your speech at the start, you sort of suggested that you understood why in the redistribution being proposed not by this Labour Council but by the Labour Government, part of the change promised to Bracknell Forest, that we will see a reduction in our grant in future years. I think the concern I have is, as a council that's been here for quite some years, is that we might be superficially an affluent borough, but we do have areas of our borough that have significant need and deprivation. And my huge concern is that that might not be picked up in the headline figures, but will impact on those communities. And we recognise the challenge going forward. But let's not dress it up in percentages. It could be a real loss of money to Bracknell Forest at a time when we're seeing service pressures. I think we also need to understand the reality of the impact of last year's budget on costs faced by the public sector and others. We've mentioned already that the shortfall in national insurance contributions of 180k still exists, despite the fact there was an initial promise to be fully refunded. There's also concerns I have about the actual inflationary cost on adult social care, not least because the Local Government Association and others are pointing out that there are quite a few smaller specialist providers where this, coupled with the increase in the national minimum wage, could tip them, not to continue in their business, which could actually mean retendering. And unfortunately, I suspect retendering for some of these services will be at higher costs. I think, Councillor Bailey, you make good mention of children's services, but let's be clear that historically, when we adopted the family safeguarding model and the work that we've done with children, we are very, our children in Bracknell Forest are fortunate that so much goes in, because actually we can be certain that they can be better supported at home, which is why, for a very good reason, the number of children actually receiving care from Bracknell Forest Local Authority is reduced where the support, particularly early intervention, is in place. Overall, I think we just need to think a little bit about the position. Much has been made of the financial stability of Bracknell Forest and of the fact that we've got low council tax. I will make the point tonight that was inherited from many years of sound Conservative financial management locally in Bracknell Forest. And if I'm thinking about the national picture, I'd gently remind the Liberal Democrats that for the first 5 years of the 14 years, you were in something called a coalition government. And I seem to remember standing up and voting through some of those proposals then. So I'd rather at this point focus on the future and where we are. There is a lot in this budget which is good, but I do have a number of things just to raise. First of all, it's very clear from the recent rate of inflation that potentially interest rates won't fall quite as fast as they would. I'd be interested in your summing up, Councillor, if you could share with us how we might find that additional money, impact on the cost of the borrowing we have for some of the projects we're doing. It might be that we borrowed at fixed term and things like that, so it might not impact. It'd be interesting to know if that could have an impact. But overall, where we are at the moment is Bracknell Forest continues to be pretty well run borough, lots of good things going on. We raised the point about the town centre cleaning because you need to keep our eyes open. We need to keep our eyes open to some of those issues. And I would hope that at some point in the year, I'd be more than happy to join some of the inspections and actually go out on a Saturday afternoon. But please don't lose sight of the fact that keeping the town centre clean, really clean, is important to the future. There are lots of good things in the budget. Disappointed that we can't find additional money for cleaning. But I think, colleagues, next year is going to be very, very difficult. And we can't shy away from the fact that Bracknell Forest residents are potentially going to be worse off in future years because of decisions made by this Labour government. They justify them, that's their call. But fundamentally, don't dress it up as percentages. There are tough times coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnard. Councillor Gilby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Barnard talks about what we inherited from the previous Conservative administration. Well, members, when this administration was elected in 2023, we faced a precipitous decline in our highway and transport infrastructure. Infrastructure, I might emphasise, is not just roads, but assets like bridges, which in a new town like Bracknell, much being built at the same time, is coming to the end of its life at the same time, adding an extraordinary financial pressure. This administration did not shy away from the challenge. Councillors of all hues hear complaints about potholes, and we responded. In our first budget last year, this administration committed an extra £5 million over 4 years to highway maintenance. As part of that pledge, the capital budget before you presents an extra £1 million on top of our rolling base of £1.7 million. Members, this does not mean every problem in the borough is solved, and we must still make deliberate decisions about how we prioritise the money we have. Nevertheless, we have come a long way in just under 2 years, from a point when a steep decline in our highway and transport infrastructure seemed inevitable. I should be clear that I do not lay the blame at the previous administration, from whom we inherited this situation. Any council will struggle with the combined impact of inflation, ageing infrastructure and a real-term decrease in government funding. But critical in that is that decreased support from the last government. Since the general election, we have seen a sea change in the support offered to local councils in meeting their transport needs. Subject to finalisation, we are set to receive an additional £858,000 capital grant funding from the Department for Transport for highway maintenance, on top of their base allocation of around £1.8 million. £254,000 towards active travel initiatives and works, and a £1 million grant enabling us to support our subsidised bus routes and improve our bus infrastructure. To paint a picture, this bus grant is more than what we received in the previous 3 years combined. I want to thank Peter Swallow MP for his role in lobbying government for this extra £2 million plus support for Bracknell Forest transport needs. At last, Bracknell Forest has a partner as government that recognises the need to tackle our potholes, support our buses and encourage active travel. It is encouraging to know this council's own increased funding for highway maintenance is supported by Bracknell Forest residents, with 86% of respondents to our budget consultation supporting our proposals. As an administration, we committed ourselves to working with residents, not at them. In that spirit, I hope residents take as welcome news the moves we as an administration have made to protect our highway and transport infrastructure, helping to keep Bracknell Forest as a great place to live and work. Members, I support the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Gilby. Councillor Prestland.
Hi, this is my first budget and I note the very high percentage of the total budget is spent on social care. I realise this is true of all local councils. Spending on social care is a statutory requirement and I understand the numbers and complexities have increased, so too will the cost. I am sure these pressures undergo a lot of due diligence to ensure that we get good value for money. When some of our residents need support, I am glad our community of Bracknell Forest can provide what is needed. I myself needed social care as a teenager after the loss of my mother. The care system swept me up and I was placed in a children's home in Bracknell called Cressex Lodge. I had a very positive time in care and I'm grateful to Bracknell Forest Council for providing me with a safe, secure, happy home. Therefore, I know how important the social care spending is because it really does make a difference.
Thank you, Councillor Prestland. Councillor Purnell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight we have proposed a budget that is not only responsible and pragmatic, but also one that aligns with our long-term vision for Bracknell Forest. As the Cabinet Member for the Environment, Community and Housing, I fully support these proposals, which strike the right balance between maintaining vital services and ensuring financial sustainability. One of the key highlights in my portfolio is the investment into the re-procurement of the RE3 waste disposal contract. This is a significant strategic partnership, and it is essential that we get this right for our residents. With the upcoming Environment Act legislation driving us towards simpler recycling, we must be ready. Investing now means that we secure the best value for our residents while making it easier for them to recycle and reduce landfill waste. This directly supports our council plan objective of a green and sustainable environment. We must also be fair in how we structure charges for non-statutory services. The small increase in brown bin charges ensures that those who use this service pay for it, rather than it being subsidised by those who don't. This is a fair and transparent approach, and it remains the case that residents who choose not to pay for a brown bin can still access free waste disposal at Longshot Lane. Our focus is on sustainability and fairness, making sure we can continue to offer high-quality services that are funded appropriately. I recognise that there is a small reduction in the discretionary works budget for street cleansing and grounds maintenance. However, this is a necessary step in ensuring our budget remains balanced while prioritising the contractual and health and safety elements of these services, which are the most important to residents. This aligns with the Labour Party's manifesto commitment to making sure resources are used efficiently and fairly. Beyond environmental services, I also want to highlight the careful approach we have taken to early help and community safety. While savings have been made in some areas, our priority remains protecting those most in need. The review of community safety funding ensures that we are focusing resources on tackling the highest priority issues, such as domestic abuse support, antisocial behaviour interventions and youth services. This ensures that while we work within a constrained budget, our most vulnerable residents remain protected. Likewise, our approach to housing repairs is about ensuring value for money while continuing to meet statutory obligations. We are maintaining support for those in temporary accommodation and continuing our work to reduce reliance on expensive emergency housing options. The focus remains on early intervention, preventing homelessness and ensuring that repairs are prioritised where they are most needed. On financial hardship, I want to emphasise the importance of the Household Support Grant, which continues to provide a crucial safety net for families facing financial difficulties. While we've had to review discretionary funding, this budget ensures that we maintain targeted support for those most at risk of hardship. That be whether it be through emergency food and energy assistance or direct financial aid to vulnerable families. We remain committed to supporting those most in need. This budget is one that protects key services, ensures that we are meeting both our statutory and environmental responsibilities, and does so in a way that is financially responsible and sustainable. I urge my fellow councillors to support these measures and continue our commitment to a cleaner, greener and fairer Bracknell Forest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purnell. Does anyone else in the room wish to speak? Councillor Frewer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will support the budget. I support particularly the extra S13A funding that Councillor Neil mentioned. This will positively and directly help Bracknell residents that are struggling. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Frewer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, it's quite a surprise to me that this budget isn't dipping into reserves this year. It's quite a pleasant surprise. Councillor Allen mentioned one-off boost this year as we're getting extra funding from the Simpler Recycling Scheme when we're already doing food waste, for example, and that's a bit of luck. But without it, I think the shortcomings in this budget would be quite glaring. Perhaps in her summing up, Councillor Neil could tell us how we're going to meet that gap next year. What are they planning to cut? The Labour government has imposed quite a lot of extra costs through national insurance, and they haven't fully funded them. There's not a great deal of evidence here that the administration has done any process re-engineering or service redesign to help contain costs during the year. In fact, last year they overspent, and without a full line-by-line access to the council's accounts, and a lot of time with officers. As an opposition, we've not been in a position to put together a full alternative budget. We put our amendment because we value our town centre. I fear that as a council we are sleepwalking towards a budget crunch in the not too distant future that will result in panicked choices because there's no sign of any preparation. Let's hope we get lucky again next year, but I wouldn't count on it. I'm going to find it difficult to support this budget.
Right. Thank you, Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Madam
I
Mayor.
think you get to have Councillor McLean.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor McLean.
Sorry, it's all a bit confused this evening. Some of you who listened to me, and that doesn't necessarily include everybody in this room, will have remembered when I said before the last election, the last general election, be careful what you wish for as you went out campaigning to elect a Labour government. Because having experienced 14 years of Conservative government, 5 of which, as Councillor Barnard has said, were a coalition with the Liberal Democrats, we, when we were running Bracknell Forest, had to accept problems with financing for local government. Now, what we've heard tonight is very upbeat, very positive, and to some degree self-congratulatory, and actually you may well deserve some of that self-congratulation. But what our residents will hear is also perhaps a degree of complacency. My fear is that central government generally isn't on the side of local government. And my fear is that we will have hard choices to make next year and the year after and the year after that. I just hope our residents can take comfort from what you have said this evening, can rely on what you said this evening, and not feel in 12 months, 18 months, 2 years or 3 years' time that they heard very warm words, very reassuring words about the finances of Bracknell Forest Council, only to be cruelly disappointed by what the Labour government does. We stood up, I stood up in this chamber and criticised my own government. I hope you, as the Labour administration, where the Labour government does things that are detrimental to Bracknell Forest and our residents, will have the strength of character to do the same, because this is what it's about. It's about the people out there in Bracknell Forest that we represent, not the Labour government. We're not here to defend Labour governments, Conservative governments, coalition governments. We're here to stand up for our residents. And I would urge you to be straight, to be honest, and to be open with our residents. And if your government does something that harms those people, please, please, please admit it.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. Is there anyone else in the room wishes to speak? No. In that case, Councillor Deputy Mayor, is there anyone? Stuart's head.
That's all right, Madam Mayor, most people don't.
Before online.
It seems a little minor in the great scheme of things, but I have noticed that the brown bins have gone up in the new budget, and I just wanted to draw people's attention to I mean, for many people, an increase in £5 can mean a lot. Particularly, I don't use a brown bin. I can't afford it, and I don't have a big enough garden. But I do know that people use them, and if the increase is a little bit too much, then I suggest getting into like a friend of mine. 5 of them go in for a bin on a yearly scheme, so they all chip in, and it really does reduce the amount that they have to spend on it. We're quite lucky here. We have our brown bags, so you don't have to have a whole bin. You can take you can chuck out a brown bag of your gardening stuff, and you can take stuff to the dump for free. That's everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Is there anyone else in this room wants to speak? Can I just ask online first?
Nobody online, Madam Mayor.
Right, thank you. Would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very pleased to second these budget proposal, which is about the budget proposal for this year and not hypothetical budgets that might arise in future years. I again enjoyed sharing our proposals with residents in libraries, community centres and in Princess Square. Of the 135 responses received, 50% were either in strong agreement or agreement with all of the proposals. The expenditure on the capital proposals will ensure that as good landlords we maintain our assets, housing stock and highways, while also providing vitally needed new school places. Additionally, we are demonstrating leadership through our programme of retrofitting our assets with double glazing, new doors, insulation, LED lighting, photovoltaic cell installations and upgraded heating. All these efforts support our drive towards reducing our carbon footprint. While the greatest support from the consultation was for improved highways, the second was for promoting independence in adult social care. Like councils across the country, our social care pressures are high. But this budget ensures the frontline services are maintained to the highest possible standards. During the consultation, many people mentioned the need to support those just above the benefit threshold. We have responded by increasing the Section 13A funds to 100k and supporting its administration. There is also extra support for those on council tax support, these to be funded from the Financial Household Reserve. This council is committed to achieving net zero emissions as near to 2030 as possible. The 250k investment is not just about adding staff, it's about unlocking funding, delivering practical solutions and ensuring a structured and accountable approach to tackling climate change. Every area the council covers affects climate change, as it is involved in the climate challenge. From tendering, roads, transport, planning, leisure, social care provision, education and everything else. I make no apology for emphasising its importance and the need to invest. The climate team has already secured £4 million in private investment for solar projects. More capacity will enable us to access further funding streams, bringing financial benefits to the council and the communities. Developing net zero hubs in the libraries will give residents accessible information on how to reduce their carbon footprint. We can scale up Solar Together and the Big Switch, enabling more residents access to cheaper, greener energy. We need to decarbonise buildings and extend our EV infrastructure. We need to drive innovation and efficiency. From the consultation on the climate change strategy, there is a lot of support for action, but we need to get all on board. We need to be able to measure and report on our achievements, because nothing succeeds like success. The climate challenge is vast, but with the right resources, it can be turned, as we've said already, into an opportunity for sustainable growth, community resilience, and long-term savings.
You have 1 minute
Ambition
left.
shared right across the council and right across the communities. The budget process started as soon as the previous year ends. Its progress is reported regularly to the corporate management team, publicly in the quarterly service reports, and is reviewed by internal and external auditing. Corrective action is taken when necessary. Therefore, these budget proposals have been developed within a sound framework, and they are robust. They present a fair balance between providing good service for all our Bracknell Forest residents and fiscal responsibility. Raising the precept by 4.9% was not an easy decision when so many are struggling, but the pressures and uncertainties including from social services and special education need budget will continue. We have included extra support for residents most in need, and councillors here are here to help and to signpost any of our residents who need support. I ask all to support these budget proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Templeton. Councillor Neal, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In summary, this budget sets us up well for 25-26 and also underpins our council plan, which provides us with stability for the coming years. We have taken our proposals to residents, listened and responded. They allow us to better support those most in need and maintain the standards we know residents appreciate. In response to Councillor Barnard's question on the impact of inflation on our borrowing, the majority of our current borrowing is historic and at a fixed rate. It is perhaps also interesting to note that the 23-24 budget that overspent was inherited from the previous administration. I have said numerous times throughout this budget process that funding arrangements will change after 25-26 and not in a way that benefits Bracknell Forest. What we have proposed this evening takes the uncertainty and risks into consideration. Increasing council tax by 4.99%, whilst a difficult decision, is the only income source entirely within our control and needed against such a backdrop of uncertainty. Finally, I am sure no one here would want to vote against what residents have told us they want. Investment in our borough's roads, new school places, supporting our most vulnerable and safeguarding our future. Several years ago, I sat in this chamber in opposition to vote on the budget, And at the time, we were told by an executive member of the previous administration that you don't go into politics to abstain on a vote. So I look forward to support from across the chamber this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor. Now, a recorded vote is required on this item. The budget recommendations are set out on page 3 to 9 of your agenda papers. Can I remind you to turn on your microphones when you answer, when your name is called? Thank you.
Councillor Allen?
For.
Councillor Bailey?
For.
Councillor Barnard?
For.
Councillor Bidwell?
For.
Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Cochrane?
For.
Councillor Collins?
For.
Councillor Christoph Eberly?
For.
Councillor Tina Eberly?
For.
Councillor Mike Foster?
For.
Councillor Sophie Forster?
For.
Councillor Brewer?
For.
Councillor Frost?
For.
Councillor Gore?
For.
Councillor Gilby?
For.
Councillor Haffajee?
For.
Councillor Harrison? Councillor Hayes? Councillor Jeffries?
For.
Councillor Karim?
For.
Councillor Mackenzie Boyle?
For.
Councillor McLean?
For.
Councillor Mossam? Councillor Neal?
For.
Councillor O'Regan?
For.
Councillor Penfold?
For.
Councillor Pickering?
For.
Councillor Pressland?
For.
Councillor Pennell?
For.
Councillor Robertson?
For.
Councillor Smith?
For.
Councillor Temperton?
For.
Councillor Kath Thompson?
For.
Councillor Philip Thompson?
For.
Councillor Virgo?
For.
Councillor Watts?
For.
Councillor Webb?
For.
Councillor Wright?
For.
Councillor Zerudini?
For.
Thank you. Apart from one abstention, that is unanimous. So the sorry, the budget is now carried for the coming year. Thank you all for attending. And sorry,
Madam Mayor, if I just want to raise a point of order before the meeting closes. Just referencing back to the earlier point of order raised by Councillor McLean with regards to whether Councillor Bidwell should have been permitted to speak when he did. I just wanted to come back to that because I believe there's an important point there, and we should make sure we don't set the wrong precedent for future meetings. Paragraph 13.3 of the Council Procedure Rules sets out the seconder's right to reserve their speech until later in the debate. However, there's nothing to my reading of that section of the Constitution that guarantees the seconder has a right to be the last person to speak or prohibits any other member from speaking after. So I believe that actually Councillor Bidwell was, it was correct that Councillor Bidwell was allowed to speak there. The Borough Solicitor, I think, was put somewhat on the spot in giving a response. So I just wonder if we might request that perhaps after the meeting, he might take the time to review and maybe provide a confirmed position on that to Council for future meetings.
thank you, Councillor Smith. I was about to suggest that we had that point clarified for future meetings. Thank you. Councillor Harrison, McLean, sorry.
Thank you. Yes. I think it's quite important that we all understand process and procedures in the borough and this council chamber, and also the terms of the council's constitution. It's always been custom and practice, and of course if we're going to change custom and practice, we of course have the liberty to do so, for the seconder of a motion to reserve for the purpose of being the last person to speak. Now clearly, if it's the case that that is changing, it will be very helpful for members to understand that it is being changed. So Madam Mayor, I agree with you and with Councillor Smith clarity is very important on this subject. If it's the case that the seconder who has reserved is not necessarily going to be the last member to be called to speak, I think we all need to understand that.
Thank you. I believe our legal representative Sanjay would like to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've heard what the Conservative group have said, and I'm grateful for the intervention of the Lib Dem group. These rules, the council budget procedure rules, have just been introduced. That's the first time we've had to apply them. There will be circumstances where there may be a conflict or ambiguity between the council procedure rules and the budget procedure rules. I'm not saying that's the case at the moment. From my perspective, it was the case that once the motion or the recommendation had been seconded, that was the end of the process. But I'm happy to take on board the point that Councillor Smith has made and review that in future. I would say, Councillor Barnard, it's only points of order that we're taking now, so unless it's a point of order.
It is a point of order. I'd also, Madam Mayor, like clarification on the order in which people speak in debate, because it was very clear during that budget debate that people indicated to speak before others, but others were chosen before that. So I think it's important that we establish how that works in practice as well.
We were aiming to do that.
Well, from where I was sitting, it wasn't happening, Madam Mayor, but I'll leave that in your capable hands for future meetings.
Right. To sort that out. Right. Which was, thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you all for participating tonight. Whether we disagree on certain points or not. But thank you again. Could you just remain in your places until the recording is switched off? Thank you.